Hello and welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving information entrepreneurs around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. Today, I am so excited to have my friend Hadlee Garrison on. Hadlee, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. This is going to be such a great and timely conversation. I know before we went live, I was talking about oh my gosh, I personally need this conversation. And I know that in the midst of COVID, so many other people do as well. So let's get you introduced. For folks that don't know Hadlee, Hadlee Garrison is a wellness coach and founder of Happy Healthy with Hadlee. She helps her clients feel better in their bodies, have more energy on a day-to-day basis, gain more confidence, cultivate a better relationship with food, and become less stressed and more joyful in their day-to-day lives. She graduated from the University of Michigan with a Bachelor of Science in Biopsychology, Cognition, and Neuroscience, and a Master's in Public Health in Health Behavior and Health Education. Her research on the intersection of health behaviors, habit change, science, body image, and food during her MPH informed the program she later created to empower individuals to take control of their own habits, behaviors, and relationships with their bodies, food, and themselves. Her online program called Happy Healthy Habits combines the concepts of behavioral science, habits for optimal health, and group dynamics to help her clients make lasting, influential changes in their lives. Hadlee, man, I feel like there's so much we could talk about right now, but I first of all really love the emphasis on habit change, right? Behavioral change, behavioral science, because as much as most of us, if not all of us, want to make positive change in our lives, sometimes, it feels beyond us. Sometimes I think there are things that we just don't understand about what behavioral change really looks like. And if we miss the boat, then we just are not equipped to make the changes that we want to make. So I'm super excited to have this conversation because I feel like we all can use more information rather than less when it comes to behavioral change and creating healthy habits.
Totally. Yes. Especially around this time of year when it's like the new year, resolutions, I'm going to change my life. That's one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of resolutions, because it kind of creates this, I have to change everything right now and,
Yes.
wait for that arbitrary date and everything. But I am a big fan of goal setting and changing our habits and all of that kind of thing. So I do think it's a really important topic, and it's not something that habit change is not something that a lot of people are talking about more and more recently, but usually it's just do this diet, do
Yes.
this exercise plan,
Set new goals. Here's how you goal set, right?
Exactly. Yes. And the behavior change piece is what's missing. The creating the systems to actually achieve those goals. SMART goals are great, but there's something missing still. We still have to get those little teeny tiny micro habits in there in order to achieve the goals that we're setting for ourselves. So it's hugely important.
Yes. Well, and I remember it was a few years ago now, I picked up the book Changeology, right? Which is 5 steps. Have you read it? Is that something that's familiar for you? So Changeology, it's a book that, and let me see what the subtitle is, 5 steps to realizing your goals. But it talks about how people get behavioral change wrong, right? And it basically breaks down behavior change into different phases. There's something that happens before you make a decision to actually change, right? And then you've got this activation energy, but that's a different phase than once you get started and you're actually climbing that hill. And that's still a different phase than maintenance, maintaining that habit over the long, and I remember it just being so helpful to understand behavioral change in that way, even from a timeline perspective. And one of the things that really stood out to me in that book is how often we will start trying to make a behavior change when we're actually in the wrong phase. We're not
Yes.
ready yet for the change. We haven't set ourselves up for success, which almost guarantees that we're going to fail.
Yes. And there's so many ways that we can actually set ourselves up for success. And most people are not doing those things. There are some awesome books out there on habit change for sure. One of my favorites is Atomic Habits by
Mhm.
James Clear. That one's like pretty popular right now. He's kind of popularizing habit change and behavior change.
And I've heard of
But
that one. I haven't picked it up and
yeah,
read it yet.
yeah, that one's really good. There are many out there, um, but basically, we need to not be relying on motivation, and that's what most people in, especially the health and wellness industry, are peddling. They're like,
And when you
"You're gonna
say
get motivated."
motivation, yes, is this also relate to or overlap with like willpower? Because people
Yes.
often end up just thinking like, oh, I don't have enough willpower to do this.
Yes. Yes. I talk to so many people who are like, I am not, like, I don't have enough discipline.
Yes.
I don't have enough willpower. I'm weak. All of these things. And I'm like, that's not true. You're a human. It's not about willpower. It's about, when we do have motivation, which sometimes we do, but motivation goes up and down. And so when we do have that motivation, that's when we can actually set ourselves up for success in the future, whether it's creating physical systems in our lives or
Mm-hmm.
it's creating, um, goals and thinking of the obstacles that might arise so that we can plan around those things and everything. There's a lot of different ways which we can go into as well, that we can actually set up when we do have the motivation, and because we won't. we
Well,
can
that's so the most
one thing
obvious
we won't have it.
example. That's right. And the most obvious example when you say that, like the number, I can't even count, especially during COVID, because I feel like COVID at our house has been like one big long experiment in chaos. I have two children, one who's 3 and one who's 8, and we've got some special needs going on, and it's just there's always a lot. And
Mhm.
meal planning around
Yeah.
here, right? If I don't do it, if I don't plan ahead for the week, if I don't do my grocery shopping, with the meals in mind that I like, it doesn't happen. We end up throwing food out. I end up just not eating, and like I'll drink coffee all day. Like your environment will influence what actually ends up happening if you haven't set up the structure and the support to carry you through those times when your motivation drops, or it is chaos, or there's unexpected things happening in your schedule, which
Yes.
I'm laughing because I showed up 15 minutes late to this interview, right? So like every day I feel like, again, and if I'm still, and the reality is like I punish myself so hard, even though I know this, I'm not always able to implement it, right? So I'm just fascinated by what it really truly takes to achieve behavioral change.
hmm Well, and so the really important thing about, especially behavior change, health changes,
Mm.
I heard you say that I don't know what exactly you just said, but like you're beating yourself up because you're like, I know
Yes.
what I need to do, but I'm not doing it. And that's so common. And that's like how I always was. I knew all of the things. I knew how, like, what kinds of things I needed to be doing
Mm.
for health. Like I was really into health and wellness as a high schooler and then into
Mm.
college and everything. But I was not living the things that I knew that I actually knew that I needed to do. And the reason for that is because I didn't have these behavior change methods, but then also because I was beating myself up so much, that was counterproductive to my to actually creating the habits that I needed to create. And
Mm.
so a lot of times that self-criticism, research has shown now that self-compassion is actually the most effective way to make any sort of change in our lives,
Mm.
which is huge. Like,
Ding,
let
ding,
that sink
ding.
in.
I know. I'm like, can you please repeat that for myself and for anybody listening? It sounds like I've got some work to do on self-compassion, because you're right. I mean, and I think a lot of us are, especially if we're high performers in certain areas of our life, like it's really easy to be self-critical when we're not measuring up in other areas.
Yes. Okay. So this is like the exact avatar, the exact client that I work with is someone who's super high achieving, knows how to succeed in, like as an entrepreneur or in business or whatever. But when it comes to themselves and their own health, or maybe they're really high achieving with their family and they always put their family first, I help people who are really high achieving, but who tend to be super self-critical to be able to start to feel the way that they want to feel in their bodies and improve that self-compassion and that self-confidence and all of that kind of thing, so that they can actually be living the life that they want to live, essentially. And of course, be more productive in their job, have more mental clarity, be more efficient, procrastinate less, all of those things.
Right? It all goes together. So I'm curious, because I know we just jumped right into habit change, but talk to us about how you got interested in this field to begin with.
Yes. So like I said, I was always very health conscious. My whole family was really into health, and they were like eating organic before it was like a thing. Everyone thought I was like really weird in my hometown. Being from a small town in West Michigan, it was like, what's organic? Like you're eating
Oh my gosh, I love that. Just recently I was joking with my sister, and like, we did not have unintelligent parents. And yet when I look back on what we ate in our childhood, like, my dad was a veterinarian. There's part of me that's like, he should have known better, And and yet, like, we didn't eat a vegetable unless it came out of a can. I mean, it was so bad. So bad. And it's not like we ever starved, but when I look at our childhood nutrition, oh my gosh.
Well, right. And so that's the case for so many people, like in our country. And, basically, like, people are eating enough food, but they're not getting enough nutrients from that food. So like they're having enough calories. Not that I am into calorie counting or anything like that, but they're having enough calories to survive, but they're not getting the nutrients that they actually need to have long-term health and to have mental clarity.
Well, and then when you layer on, because, and so much of what my sisters and I have even learned in our adult life, I know began in childhood, right? So we're all gluten intolerant. We're all dairy intolerant. Like, I'm sure that we have probably had leaky gut for years without even knowing what it was. And so you layer, like, not only not getting enough nutrients to begin with, but then what you are eating is causing inflammation. And so even the nutrients that you are getting, you're not absorbing. Like, it's really,
so much there.
There's so much. And looking back and piecing together the puzzle, it's just like, oh my gosh, for people that can't see me, it's like palm to the forehead, right? And then when you understand and start to really get what it takes to be nutritious and to eat a really wholesome, eat in a wholesome way, then you understand in some ways how high that bar is, right? But it's one of the things that I feel like, as much as we know, like, we can always do better.
Well, and that's kind of what got me started in all of this. When I was a sophomore in high school, my whole family basically became vegetarian, because we were like, okay, like, meat is killing us. And so we need to, whatever. I don't believe that meat is killing us, but the quality of meat that we were having was, not great.
Oh my gosh, you're talking to somebody who literally, like, a treat in our house were those little Vienna sausages. Do you even know what a Vienna sausage is? So bad. It's like Spam or whatever, Anyways, I remember, like, we would pull those out of the cans and whoa. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So that was kind of like, and I feel like that's the case for a lot of people. People will become vegan or vegetarian or whatever, and that will be kind of their start in the health journey, which, nothing wrong with that. However, when I started, becoming very health conscious, I was also becoming very body conscious at the same time. I was in high school, and, I was not like rail thin, though I was absolutely not overweight at all. But, I had a sister who was very thin. Everyone in my family is way taller than me. So I had I had a different body from
Mm-hmm.
people in my family and some of my friends and stuff. And so I started to pair like my health with how my body looked,
Yeah.
as I would argue almost every single person in our society does
Right.
at this
And
point.
certainly most women that I know,
Yes,
right? Certainly
exactly.
most women, just
Yeah.
based on societal messaging, the way that values are deeply embedded within
Yeah.
certain families, like all of it.
Totally. Yes. And so that was that was something that was a real struggle for me, especially with the if you think about the self-compassion piece, like there was no it was
Mm-hmm.
all very self-critical. And so it wasn't necessarily trying to be it sort of was trying to be as healthy as I could, but really so that I could look the way that I wanted to look, right?
Right. Right.
And so when I went into college, it was the same way. And I started to do some research in my grad program at U of M in my Master's of Public Health. And, I started to research a little bit about like disordered eating
Mm-hmm.
and eating disorders in general and stuff. And I was talking to a lot of people about this, and I realized that while not everyone has a full blown eating disorder, almost every woman I had ever talked to had a really, really weird relationship with food, if not a totally dysfunctional relationship with
Yes.
food. And,
Yes.
the restriction and binge, or, forgetting to eat all day and then eating everything in sight. And, and there are so many different patterns that we have that are dysfunctional around food.
Mm.
And so that became something that I was really, really passionate about, even though before that I had been passionate about the nutrients that we need to be getting and that
Mm-hmm.
we're not getting, and, food access and things like that, or rather nutrient access.
Right.
Um, but then I paired that kind of with this, you know, rejecting diet culture essentially.
Mm.
And something that was really frustrating for me during that time was that it was either, super, super health focused and, like I'm going to eat all of the clean foods, I'm never going to eat anything quote unquote bad, all of these things. Or it was like body positivity, which is great, but it was like not actually focused on health.
On health. That's right.
And so I was like, how can we actually bring these things together so that we can feel the way that we want to feel in our bodies and
Mm-hmm.
be healthy, but still, feel good about ourselves and our bodies and not be beating ourselves up all the time and everything. And I
No,
found that they actually go together.
right. Ding. Well, and the thing that's so interesting about that is like, of course they go together. And yet, if you've lived in modern society, you know how much, at least I can say in my own personal experience as a female like you in a family where I was like, one of these does not look like the other. I had like rail thin sisters and
Mm-hmm.
parents who placed a very, very high value on being extraordinarily thin.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some things that we certainly inherit, but I think also just society in general really rewards like disassociating from your body,
Totally.
right?
Yes.
Everything that it teaches, like even from a young age about, oh, there's not enough food to go around, eat everything on your plate. Like it really,
Mm-hmm.
like there's so many ways that we are taught to disassociate from the way that we feel and from intuitive eating and from really tuning into our bodies rather than just turning off that connection.
I am so glad you brought that up because that's a huge part of what I help my clients do. And it's something that I was totally disassociated from my body even as a young kid. I remember reading books and having them talk about like, people could sense things like with their body. Like,
Mhm.
the hair on the back of their neck would stand up, all of that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that must just be like a literary device. It's not a real thing. And, little did I know that our bodies could actually tell us things and we could actually listen to them. And we didn't have to just
Mhm.
have our mind control everything about our bodies. And so
Mhm.
when I started learning, and actually I started learning about Ayurveda, which is the sister science to yoga, and it's an ancient Indian health system. And they're all about that mind, body, even spirit connection.
Hmm.
And I was like, this makes so much more sense.
Yes, this
So,
integrated approach to how we actually are meant to live and enjoy
exactly.
ourselves and enjoy this physical experience. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And it brings it into, it's so much more holistic, not even just like holistic for our physiology, but it's about experiencing our lives in a way that we want to experience them, and reacting in a way that is that makes it more positive, and just being able to kind of go through life without so much stress and turmoil and drama even.
Mm.
So one of the habits that I coach my clients in is actually called easeful living. And that's separate from meditation or mindfulness or anything else. One of the habits is also mindfulness. Sitting in silence is what I call it. But easeful living is incredibly important, because if we can actually like lean back into the support of our physiology and the habits that we're implementing and the automation of the habits that we're implementing, then life becomes so much easier and we become
Mm.
so much more resilient. So,
Well, and I love this, because one of the things that I'm thinking is that I think we tend to so often, and I think certain personalities are more prone to this than others, but we tend to segregate areas of our life. Like, how am I doing measuring up as a mom? How am I doing, measuring up in my business? How am I doing measuring up as a partner? How am I doing in the health and fitness, And so rather than looking at it as this integrated whole, and I really love the concept of, teaching and educating people around nutrition, health, mind body connection as a way, especially for people who are highly motivated in other areas of their life, as a
mhm,
way to connect those together, right? And understand, obviously, even though we recognize it, we don't always live it, that health is underlying all of those things and our ability to show up with joy and ease in different areas of our life.
totally. I remember there was like an application that I wrote in high school, and it was like, what's the most important factor for, like social well-being or something like that. And I was like, oh, it's health. Like health has to underlie all of that. So I wrote an entire essay on that. Um, and yeah, it's so incredibly important, to bring those things together. And I think that a lot of the health and wellness industry is missing
Mm.
a large component of what health actually is. And that is self-compassion and actually feeling really good, rather than having it be like no pain, no gain, push, push, push. I
Mhm.
don't think that we have to push nearly as much as we do. I do believe in, full engagement and then full recovery for sure, because I think that builds resilience. But we don't need to be, especially women, don't need to be doing the same exact workout in the gym every single day, or eating the
Mm.
same foods every single day, or anything like that. We need different variety. And I'm speaking of exercise and food because that's the most common thing, but I focus on a lot more than that,
Yeah.
because it helps. Like, other habits actually help with our relationship with food and exercise and all of that. And so yeah, so I think that we have it backwards in our society, and a lot of that has to do with, like, the industry making money. Right? Like, they
Mhm.
have to convince you that you aren't, worthy or whatever, and if you follow this diet, then you will be, in order for them to make money and keep making money. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle for sure.
Well, and I think there's a part of this, short term fix to a long
Yes.
term problem, if you will, right? And
Yes.
whether you call it a problem or a long term whatever, like, the reality is we have to live with ourselves our whole lives. And there's nothing that
Hmm.
is a short term fix to underlying, issues with the way that we prioritize ourselves or prioritize health. And so joining a 12-week program is not going to change your life if you don't fix the underlying issues. And so what you're speaking about, this issue of self-compassion, and like so much of the really probably mindset around how we address this is missing, because like you said, it's an industry that's heavily monetized on, first of all, convincing people that there's something wrong with them, but also addressing a long-term issue with a short-term fix.
Exactly. And then having repeat customers, because they know that they're not actually going to fix it, right? With the 12-week thing or the 10-week or 30 days or whatever it is.
Even with exercise, and you look at the way, metabolisms adjust, if you will, like there isn't a reason that it should always be the same solution, right? So I think it's really important, this concept of, being flexible, not only with your diet and your eating and seasonally, and understanding it doesn't have to be the same routine day in and day out.
And it shouldn't be.
And it shouldn't be. Yes. And I think people often want, like, what is that one solution that's going to make all of this easier? And I just don't think that there is one.
And that's what my mental patterns used to be. Totally. It was like, if I can just follow this diet, like if I can just follow like vegan, or if I could just follow this, if I can just not eat these things, like then everything will be fine,
It's like that missing piece to the puzzle. Like there's one piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like listening to podcasts and reading books and, listening to all these different things that I was like, just tell me the answer. What's the answer? Like, especially for people who are really driven, who are just like, I followed this thing and that led me to success here.
So impatient.
Why can't I follow something here? And so that's what I do with my clients a lot, is I work with all of my clients for at least a year, because it is, incredibly important. And the hope and the goal is that by the end of that year, they'll have the tools to be able to take it out into the world. And that's happened for all of my clients who have left, though I still have some clients who have stuck around because they love the community. But basically, I help people. I don't just tell them, okay, you're experiencing this, okay, do this. I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, and there's absolutely a place for nutritionists and dietitians. But I help people really start to notice what's happening in their bodies when they don't get enough sleep, or when they meditate, or when they are, eat a certain food, or eat too much of a certain food, or too little, whatever it is, and just start to get really curious. Curiosity is the game here. Start to get really, really curious about, okay, how do I feel right now? And what actually led me to this point? And that's so much more valuable than just telling people what to do, because then they don't have the skills after the fact to be able to discern that for themselves. Yeah.
Well, and that piece that you just talked about, I think, is so huge, because we're in a society where I think so many people look outside themselves for the solution. And like, nobody knows your everyday, your eating habits, your sleep. Like, when it comes to your health, like, nobody knows more about your picture than you do. And yet we're often, I think, taught to really rely on experts and doctors and somebody else to tell us what's going on. And I remember right out of law school, I had a series of just really crazy events that happened back to back to back. And they were all very, very high stress events. And I had basically like a stress-induced round of hypoglycemia, where my blood sugar was dropping really, really fast. I would get these really terrible headaches. I had, for a short time, like I had a series of panic attacks. They were all related. But it led into a year of poor health, of like feeling really, really badly in my body. And it was all stress related. And I didn't recognize that I could fix this with nutrition, right? It was the stress-induced round of like hypoglycemia. I just wasn't eating enough. I would and what I was eating wasn't helping the problem. And so I just had these cyclic headaches and like body tremors and things that literally lasted for a year. And my doctors couldn't figure it out. Like regular medicine could not figure out. They were telling me I needed a spinal tap and a brain MRI and, thought maybe I had MS. And like, it was just crazy town. It was so crazy. And I went to I threw in the towel on traditional medicine. I was like, I am done with that. Like that is not working and I'm not getting a spinal tap. And that was the last straw. And so I found a naturopath and but I had been keeping a journal. Like this is the part about going inward, is that somewhere in that year of hell, I thought, you know what? Nobody knows more about what's going on than I do. I should probably start observing it. And so I started this journal, and actually my sister, who's having some health issues right now, I looked it up the other day. It's called the Health Minder or Body Minder. There's a set of journals that are brilliantly done if you have a health issue that you're tracking. I mean, you track weather, you track sleep habits. It has a space for everything.
Awesome.
You track, like it has an image of a human body, so you can track like symptoms and anything that you're feeling on a daily basis. You track your supplements, and that way you can start to observe any patterns or associations that might be arising because of your habits, because of either what you're putting in your body or what you're doing. And so I did that for an extended period of time. And then by the time I got to my naturopath, like I literally just handed over this journal, like, here's everything, and so I was so relieved in our first meeting. He said, you're young, you're healthy. There's a very simple explanation for this, and we're going to figure it out, and that was the first time in a year I'd heard somebody say that. And guess what he started with? Just a full blood work, my full panel of blood work, just looking at the basics. And he studied my journal for a few weeks, and we scheduled a follow-up, and he came back and he said, I think you're having hypoglycemia. And I think it's making you feel terrible. And if you eat this way for, consistently for 8 or 10 weeks, I think all these symptoms are going to reverse out in the order that they came on. We did that. And I simply needed to be adding protein, higher protein every meal, every time I ate. That needed to come first. Really simple changes. But I didn't have the knowledge to know what was going on. But once I did that, he was exactly right. Like in 4 weeks, all my symptoms were gone. No more headaches, no more tremors. Like all these things that had rocked my world for a year were gone.
Yes, it's huge. It makes so that's for sure one piece of the puzzle, right? Like, we have like all of these mindset things. And then the other piece is like, we actually do need information about nutrition and stuff as well. Yes. And so when people talk about how we don't need, we just need to, eat intuitively. A lot of times people think, oh, that just means I'm going to eat whatever I want. Of course, the intuitive like specialists and stuff don't actually promote that, but that's what people think.
Yes. Yes.
And so, so having that knowledge of nutrition is very, very important as well, because a lot of times we just don't know what is going to make us feel a certain way. And so that's where like the, naturopaths and dietitians and all of that come into play. And I've had awesome success with some of my clients who have gone to a dietitian, and then I've worked with them to figure out how to actually implement a lot of the habits that, or, the food patterns and all of that kind of thing. They get the information from the dietitian. Of course, I help people with some of that too, but not, I don't give them plans. I don't tell them like, you should be eating this kind of thing, just basics. But once they come back, then I'm like, okay, let's actually implement this stuff. And having that pairing is huge for people who are experiencing,
something health related or something they've got to figure out.
For sure.
Well, and I think it just, what I want to say is I think there is no one size fits all solution, but you do have to combine the power of attention, paying attention to what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, right? That power of observation and tracking it. And not everybody loves to track, but if you literally, have an issue that you're working on that you've got to resolve, I think it's really important to measure it and to have some way of tracking results that will guide you to making better decisions.
Totally. Yeah. And the other piece that I'll say here too is is stress totally impacts all of it. And a lot of times we don't think that it does.
Yes, or we're just not aware that what we are experiencing is stress, right?
Yes, totally. Yeah. Well, and that's actually an interesting point because sometimes I'll have clients who are like, I'm working out every day, I'm like doing intense exercise and stuff, and it's not helping me because we learn that exercise decreases stress. However, if we're doing really intense exercises every day and we're already in a state of fight or flight,
it increases your cortisol.
It increases it. Yes. So we are increasing, we're not only staying in fight or flight, but it's actually, it's a literal stress on our bodies. And so we then experience more stress. And so doing things that are more fluid, sort of more dancey type things. You guys can't see me, but I'm dancing in my seat.
or even walking, even gentle, slow walking, right? Where it's
restorative
consistent.
Things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
No, this point is huge because I have learned this over the years as an adult, which is that we're fed this lie about needing to work out intensely for long periods of time. The more, the better, all of this kind of stuff on this track to, fitness or, health. And I think what science has shown us, and especially the trends that we're seeing in more recent times, is the high impact interval training for shorter periods of time where you have bursts of energy in your workout and your fitness can really promote that, the stress response or the endurance, the rebuilding muscle tissue, but you don't need to do it for an hour.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
You don't need to go do that every day or get on a treadmill and just be killing yourself to actually achieve the results that you want.
Exactly. And again, it's full engagement and then full recovery as well. And so we can, our bodies can sustain some really intense exercise and it's like really cool. However, we have to also be doing things that recover us from that really intense exercise in order to keep it sustainable and not get injured or not get burnt out, or anything like that, or not just get really, really stressed. Because again, it's all about sort of like a pulsation of, intensity versus recovery and rest and rejuvenation. And especially for people who are really high achieving, who've started their own business or who are, high up in their business or whatever. For a lot of those people, they tend to push. And so that's a lot of times what I'm working on with my clients is, okay, you think that by pushing, you're going to succeed, but that's not how it works here.
Well, but how often...
it's not how it's going to work, anywhere really, because if we push too hard, we'll burn out even in business or, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think especially on my husband who's done some fitness things in the last year, and actually I joke he's living his best life during COVID and my personal, my personal self-care is way on the back burner. But I also in watching some of his trainings with him, I think sometimes the masculine approach to, working out and this concept of pushing and no pain, no gain, I think it really does a disservice to this idea that our health and fitness and nutrition, I think we're better off if we can approach it as a journey, not a regimen, and not a short-term solution, not a one piece of the puzzle that's always going to fit, And totally. I think it can be really hard to undo that training or that wiring that I think is so often built in.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's some really interesting research coming out about this now, because all of the, health and wellness models that we've had, all of the research that we've done in the past has really been around the male body And so, like, that's the case for, pharmaceuticals and, anything in our healthcare system, basically, until like the past couple of decades. And even that's rare. The reason for that is because women's bodies are cyclical. And so they didn't want to deal with the fact that, women could be on their periods, or they could be, ovulating or whatever. And that could impact the study. Well, we need to know that it's going to impact the study, because we need to know how it's going to work for us. So now there's some research coming out about it, which is awesome. But there is that model that we've all grown up with, and that has been ingrained in us, that is very masculine. It's literally based on the male body. And so the female body needs to be working in cycles. Like, we need to be doing different exercises at different times of the month. We need to be eating different things at different times of the month. And usually we don't, we can have like a lot of information around what things we need to be doing at those times of the month. But if we are really tapped into our bodies will also kind of show us what it is that we need to be doing. Our bodies will be a little bit more tired, at different times of the month. And that's telling us that, okay, don't do a super intense
Not time to push
exercise.
really hard. Yes.
Or, it'll tell us, we'll have cravings. And, that's a whole nother thing, where if we can get really curious about our cravings and wondering, like, okay, what is it that my body's actually wanting, rather than just chocolate or just ice cream or whatever.
Totally. Like, are you missing magnesium, right?
Or exactly. Yep. And those fluctuate throughout the month. And so we need different things. And so all of that being said, is that when we do tap into our bodies more, our bodies will help us along the way to tell us what we actually need, which is really cool.
Well, and I love this approach. I mean, first of all, that it's really varied, and there isn't one strict thing that we all should be doing. There's a guy in this space. Have you heard of Dr. Jade Teta? I'm not sure how you say his last name. Teta, just T-E-T-A. You'd probably really, based on what I'm hearing, I think you'd really like his stuff, because he's very much a contrarian. Like, he will just be like, that's BS. Don't follow anybody who says this is the only thing that's going to work for you and you have to do it this way. He said every body is different. You have to approach it like an experiment. Here are the things that you should be paying attention to and measuring. And maybe, if you're having a craving for junk food or whatever, you should have a little bit, because it's going to make you stay more on track throughout the day versus ignoring it. Like, he actually just totally believes in paying attention and the power of observation, and just saying, like, no, all junk food is not bad. If a little bit helps you stay on track the rest of the day so that you are more healthful, that could be a helpful strategy for you, versus just total restraint, where then you lose it and you fall off the wagon for a week, And he said everybody's different.
And that's a huge mindset shift. Yeah.
Yes.
So for so many people that I work with, and this was absolutely the case for me, it was like it was very all or nothing. It was like, I am on it, I'm doing the thing, whatever. And then I would eat something or do something that was like not on the plan, quote unquote.
Yes.
And I would be like, I ruined it all. I'm just going to eat everything in sight. I'm not going to work out. I'm just going to, I'm not going to sleep early.
It's like a light switch. It's on or off. Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, I'll just start tomorrow, or I'll start on Monday, or I'll start, whenever. And then I'll finally be able to do it right. Yeah. That's not how behavior change works at all. And it's super, super detrimental, not only to actually changing behaviors, but also to our physical and mental and emotional well-being.
Yes. Well, and it's so interesting, because I think so many people can relate to what you just said about, like, it's all or nothing. I think we're partly trained that way. Like, you're either on the plan doing all the things, or you're not. And if you're not, you're failing.
It's part of diet culture. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's, how do you get people to soften up around the edges on that and be more flexible with themselves?
Yeah. And just looking at everything as like, okay, nothing is bad or good, really. That's another thing that
Mm-hmm.
we assign morality. That's part of diet culture, is like we assign morality to certain foods, to certain amounts of foods, to exercise, or just living a healthy lifestyle. And I mean, like, I tell my clients, like, if you're not living a healthy lifestyle, that does not mean that you're bad. It
Yeah.
doesn't. It has nothing to do with your worth at all whatsoever. And you can also do things that are going to make you have a better experience in your life, better day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
habits, and a better lifestyle, essentially. um, and so if we can take ourselves out of the morality piece, and not look at things as good or bad, but rather be like, what do I want to experience next? How do I want to feel next in my body? If I eat this, my experiences in the past have told me that I'm going to feel this way. Do I want to feel that way? Is it worth it to feel that way right now? Is it going to make me feel, more energized, or whatever it is? And then we can, with that curiosity of like, how has this impacted me in the past, then we can
Yes.
make those decisions without it being good or bad.
Yes. No, that's right. So back to and I so enjoy his teaching, but it's like this. How did that choice that I just make influence me, and how does it, is it a choice I should continue to make? But understanding that relationship and getting curious about it, I think a lot of people have a hard time doing if they're just following somebody's rule book,
Mm-hmm.
And the Jade Tita, or Tata, however you say his last name, his rule for this is, it's a funny phrase. It's like he says, "Is your schmeck in check?" And schmeck stands for, like, I think it's sleep, hunger, energy, hormones. Like, he's got this whole whole
Mm-hmm.
little acronym, but it's really true. If you do something like you go to bed after midnight and you realize you feel terrible the next day, versus going to sleep at 9 or 10 and just waking up earlier, like, that's a sleep issue you've got to figure out to optimize your health. Not everybody can go by the same rule book. Not everybody's an early to bed person. Not everybody's an early to rise person. There is no one size fits all. But, looking at the fact that it's a complex picture with all these elements and being very curious about how they relate to each other, I think is so powerful.
Totally. Yeah, and so there are definitely universal truths, and we need to have some nuance to all of them, right? And so
Mm,
that's what I do with my clients, is I have a framework of the habits that we go into, basically, for everyone, and refining those different habits and everything. But I help them figure out, I don't tell them this is what's going to be right for you,
right.
but I help them with kind of some structure and everything to figure out what is going to be the right thing for you
Mm,
at this stage of your life. With this kind of schedule you have going on, with how you're wanting to feel, what you're wanting
mm,
to do, even the season of the year that impacts us. And for women, the season, the month, the time of the month, and everything.
yeah.
So yeah, so there are universal truths that, there are things that are going to make us feel better and feel worse, for pretty much everyone.
Yep.
And we need to tailor it to what it is that we actually need.
Oh, I love that. No, I love this idea of universal truth, but then having some flexibility within that.
Hmm.
Um, what do you find? Like, are there a couple of things that you can share that you find either most people get wrong or
Yeah.
misunderstand, or, like, is there any myth busting you want to do that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think the biggest one um is like the all or nothing tendency, the
Mm,
perfectionism of like, I
mm,
just have to do it right and then everything will be fine. Um and then the other piece of that is that, like, we're doing that because we want to feel better about ourselves. We feel like there's something missing.
mm-hmm.
And so a big piece of what I do with my clients is help them to realize that there's not actually something missing. We don't need to fix them. We just need to, help them figure out, like, their own worth, and also tweak some things in their behaviors and that kind of
Mm,
thing, in order for them to feel, to actually feel the way that they want to feel, like physically and that kind of thing. But there's nothing missing. There's nothing wrong with anyone. And so that's a huge piece of, the wellness industry that I'm like, we need to not promote that anymore. I get that you're making a lot of money off of it.
Yeah.
But in order to actually make that real and lasting change, we have to come from a place of like self-love, even body love before we get to the place that we want to be in our bodies or whatever. We have to come from that place in order to make lasting and sustainable change, for sure.
Oh, I love that. Yes, the body love. I mean, I think that could be a whole separate conversation just on its own. I know we're getting a little bit short on time here, but the other thing I wanted to ask is for people that are struggling with making that behavior change. So one, yes, we need to figure out the body love piece and the self-compassion and all of that. But what are some of the quick or easy tips that you give around how to successfully achieve behavior change, right? And you could just walk us through one or two examples.
Yeah. So the first thing that I start with is basically make it as easy as you possibly can. So start with like 2 minutes. If you're like, I am super inconsistent with my, let's say like exercise with workouts in the morning, you want to be working out every day, which is fine as long as you're doing some recovery workouts.
You're not pushing the whole time. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So start with 2 minutes. So the goal is not the workout, the like one-off workout.
The habit.
Goal is consistency. And the bigger goal is becoming the kind of person who works out every day. So you have to pair that identity evolution with the habit change. So you have to think in your mind that you are the kind of person who works out every day. And in order to bolster that, basically, we need to work out every day so that we become the kind of person who's working out every day. We need both of those pieces. So because we can change our behavior, but if we don't change our identity, then we won't continue it long term. We can also change our identity, but if we don't change the behavior, then we feel like we're lying to ourselves.
Yes.
So we need both.
Yeah.
So we can start with 2 minutes and we can always build on from there. This is not tricking ourselves and being like, oh, I'll start with 2 minutes, but really I'm going to do an hour. Like that's not what I'm saying here. It's literally starting, I'm going to do jumping jacks and sit-ups and push-ups or something, whatever you want to do for those 2 minutes. And you can keep going if you want to, but sometimes I'll tell my clients like, don't just stop at 2 minutes so that you know that you're not lying to yourself. And then you can add on after you make those 2 minutes consistent. So that's the number one thing to start with. That's kind of the easiest one to start.
Well, I love that. First of all, the concept of identity evolution, I think is what you called it.
Yeah.
Really, really important that we are doing things aligned with our identity. And if we need to change it, like our identity needs to change as well, right? But also this concept of consistency, because I think it also can feel really futile to attempt something that's actually too high of a hurdle.
Yes.
If your goal for yourself is 5 days a week and you do it 2, it still feels like you're failing.
Totally. Yes. So the consistency piece is so important. A lot of times, people will be like, oh, I'm going to do this 3 days a week. And I always encourage people to, instead of that, how can we make it? So for example, like going to bed at a certain time, people will be like, I want to go to bed by 10 p.m. 3 days a week. And I'm like, that's going to be so much harder than going to bed at 11:30 if you're going to bed like at midnight or 1 or whatever, than going to bed at 11:30 every night. And then we can like build, go backwards from there if you're wanting to do that.
Oh, you're speaking my language right now. I have had a year of late nights based on trying to do what I want to do with kiddos and work. But yes, that feel like I would love to go to bed at 10, but is it reasonable? Probably not for me right now. But
Right.
when you say that, like, oh, 11:30 every night, I'm like, I could probably shoot for that. Like, that's probably something I could actually hit, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Hadlee, so for folks that are thinking like, oh my gosh, I need more of this. I need more education, information, support, whatever. I mean, if you're like me, there's just not enough, meaning that more support is always welcome. Where do you like for people to connect with you online?
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Instagram and a little bit on Facebook as well, but I'm at both places. I'm Happy Healthy Hadlee.
Awesome. And just for people listening, that's Hadlee with 2 E's.
Yes, Lee instead of Ley. So, and then my website is happyhealthyhadley.com. Made it easy on everyone.
Love
Just
it.
made it all the same.
Keep it consistent. That's perfect. So if you're listening, you can grab those links to her social media. I'll share her website at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast, where you can access the recording as well as the show notes. Hadlee, I think you've got a gift with our audience. I mean, a gift for our audience, right? Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Yes. So we've talked a lot about behavior change, and we've talked a lot about the mindset and, different things that we need to shift around our mindset around health and all of that. And so I have this quiz that's actually going to help you figure out what habit might actually make the biggest difference for you in your life. And so if you're wanting to figure out, okay, what's actually like, what do I need to do? Because a lot of you are high achieving people who want to figure out what they need to do. You can go to my website and take this quiz. And basically it'll ask you a few questions to figure out what habit might be like the first step for you. All of the habits that I coach people in are important, but this is a good first step for sure. So yeah. And then, oh shoot, I can't hear you.
Thank you. I know I'd hit mute and then forgot. So I'll share that link as well at the show notes. So if you're looking for that quiz, I know I want to go take it to figure out where to start. I will put that link in the show notes. Again, legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. And I think this is a crazy offer to me, but I think you were offering also maybe a session or something. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm offering a 30-minute free health goals session. I love doing these because it helps people gain clarity around what they're actually wanting to experience in their lives next. And, starting to put together the pieces of like, what do I actually need to do in order to get there? And so, that's what I love to help people do. Obviously my clients and everything, but that for you guys for free
that's amazing. If you're listening, you need to go run and not walk to that offer because it's free 30-minute session to help you get started on your goals, which just sounds phenomenally generous. So Hadlee, any final thoughts, takeaways, action steps you want to leave with our listeners today?
I would just say that you get to decide how you want to feel in your everyday life. And it's not good or bad. It's not, you're not worth more or less if you're doing certain things. But you get to also decide, like, how does my body want to feel? How do I want to feel mentally, emotionally? And you can get the support that you need for that. And also, like, you get to decide how to actually, what you actually want to experience in your life. Of course, there are obstacles around these things. Everyone has obstacles. Some have more intense obstacles than other people. But just know that you are not alone if you don't feel great in your body all the time, because most people, that's the case. But there is support out there for you. And, I really encourage you to try to seek that out. And hopefully that we will be able to create even more support for people who are needing that in the future as well.
Oh, I love that. Well, and there's a lot of power in deciding, right? And I love that we get to recognize that it's not like we're not at the whims of everything around us. We get to proactively choose, what we're going to do to support ourselves and support our health and support how it is that we want to feel.
Totally.
Hadlee, so fun to connect with you today. I know we just covered the tip of the iceberg, but I really love this conversation. I think it's such an important one. There were so many gems. I think the self-compassion is a huge one. So many others. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here today.
Thank you so much. Yes, it was so fun.
Absolutely. Where?